Fellow South Africans, on the 26th August 2012, I appointed a commission of inquiry to investigate matters of public, national, and international concern arising out of the tragic incidents at the Lonmin mine in Marikana, Rustenburg, in the Northwest Province during 11 and 16 August 2012. About 44 people lost their lives and many others were injured. The commission was chaired by retired Judge Ian Farlam, assisted by advocates P.D. Hemraj, SC, and B.R. Tokota, SC. I wish to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to them for the professional, efficient, and effective manner in which they conducted the commission. I also thank families of all the persons who lost their lives, both those who died before and during 16 August 2012, for their cooperation with the Commission, despite being in pain and immense difficulties because of the tragic loss of their loved ones. Our hearts also go out to the families of those persons who were killed after the 16th August 2012, whose murders fell outside the scope of the inquiry. We also thank the witnesses, legal teams, and injured workers. The participation of all injured, the participation of all ensured the success of the commission. The commission was tasked with inquiring into and making findings and recommendations concerning the conduct of Lonmin PLC, the South African Police Service, SABC, the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCO, the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, the Department of Minerals Resources, DMR, and other government departments, as well as individuals and groupings. The main findings and recommendations can be summarized as follows. 1. Findings against Lonmin. The Commission has found that Lonmin did not use its best endeavors to resolve the disputes that arose between itself and its workers who participated in the unprotected strike on the one hand, and between the strikers and those workers who did not participate in the strike. It also did not respond appropriately to the threat of and the outbreak of violence. Lonmin also failed to employ sufficient safeguards and measures to ensure the safety of its employees. Lonmin also insisted that its employees who were not striking should come to work, despite the fact that it knew that it was not in a position to protect them from attacks by strikers. The Commission also criticized Lonmin's implementation of undertakings with regards to the social and labor plans. Findings against AMCO. The Commission has found that officials of AMCO did not exercise effective control over AMCO members and supporters in ensuring that their conduct was lawful and it did not endanger the lives of others. They sang provocative songs and made inflammatory remarks which tended to aggravate and already volatile situation. The Commission also noted that the President of AMCO, Mr. Joseph Matunjwa, did his best before the shootings to persuade the strikers to lay down their arms and leave the copy. Findings against NUM. The National Union of Mine Workers did not exercise its best endeavors to resolve the dispute between itself and the strikers. The NUM wrongly advised rock driller operators that no negotiations with Lonmin were possible until the end of the 2-year wage agreement. The union also did not take the initiative to persuade and enable Lonmin to speak to the workers. The NUM also failed to exercise effective control over its membership in ensuring that their conduct was lawful and did not endanger the lives of others. It encouraged and assisted non-striking workers to go to the shafts in circumstances where there was a real danger that they would be killed or injured by armed strikers. Findings against individual strikers. Individual strikers and loose groupings of strikers promoted a situation of conflict and confrontation which gave rise, directly or indirectly, to the deaths of Lonmin security guards and non-striking workers, and endangered the lives of the non-striking workers who were not injured. Findings in respect of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. The counsel for injured and arrested persons alleged that Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa is the cause of the Marikana massacre and that he must be held accountable for the death of 34 minors. The Commission has found that it cannot be said that Mr. Ramaphosa was the cause of the massacre, and the accusation against him are groundless. Findings in respect of Minister Nathi Mthethwa. The Council for Inquiry and Arrested Persons alleged that Mr. Mthethwa is the cause of the Marikana massacre and that he must be held accountable for the death of 34 minors. The Commission found that the executive played no role in the decision of the police to implement the tactical option on the 16th August 2012. If the strikers did not lay down their arms, which led to the deaths of the 34 persons. Findings in respect of Minister Shabangu. The Council for Injured and Arrested Persons submitted that Minister Shabangu should be prosecuted on charges of corruption and perjury. No findings were made against Minister Shabangu. Findings against the police. In respect of the tragic incident of 16 August 2012, the Commission found that the police drew up an operational plan which entailed the encirclement of a relatively small group of strikers who would be in the copy early in the morning. The strategy entailed encircling the strikers with barbed wire and offering them an exit point through which they would need to move while handing over their weapons. This phase was only capable of being implemented early in the morning when there was a relatively small number of strikers. Attempts were also made to negotiate with the strikers by the police. The encirclement plan was replaced by the tactical option, which was defective in a number of respects. The tactical option was implemented at about 15:40 on that day, resulting in the death of strikers in Scene 1 and Scene 2. The Commission found that the police operation should not have taken place on the 16th August because of the defects in the plan. the Commission has found that it would have been impossible to disarm and disperse the strikers without significant bloodshed on the afternoon of the 16th of August. The police should have waited until the following day, when the original encirclement plan, which was substantially risk-free, could have been implemented. The Commission also found that the decision that the strikers would be forcibly removed from the copy by the police on the 16th of August if they did not voluntarily lay down their arms was not taken by the tactical commanders on the ground. The decision was instead taken by Lieutenant General Mbombo, the Northwest Police Commissioner, and was endorsed by the SABC leadership at the extraordinary session of the National Management Forum. The Commission also found that the operation should have been stopped after the shooting at Scene 1, and that there was also a complete lack of command and control at Scene 2. The Commission has also questioned the conduct of the police management during the inquiry. The police leadership did not initially disclose to the Commission the fact that the original plan was not capable of being implemented on the first date and that it had been abandoned. In addition, police leadership did not inform the Commission that the decision to go ahead with the tactical option if the strikers did not voluntarily lay down their arms and disperse was taken at the National Management Forum meeting on the 15th August. Instead, they informed the Commission that this decision was taken on the 16th of August and only after the situation had escalated. The Commission has also raised serious concern that there was a delay of about an hour in getting medical assistance to the strikers who were injured at Scene 1, and asserts that at least one striker might have survived if he had been treated timeously. 2, recommendations. The Commission recommends that Lonmin's failure to comply with the housing obligations under the social and labor plans should be drawn to the attention of the Department of Mineral Resources, which should take steps to enforce the performance of these obligations by Lonmin. The Commission has recommended that a panel of experts be appointed comprising senior officers of the legal department of the SABC, senior officers with extensive experience in public order policing, and independent experts in public order policing, both local and international, who have experience in dealing with crowds armed with sharp weapons and firearms as presently prevalent in the South African context. This panel should, among others, revise and amend all prescripts relevant to public order policing, investigate the world's best practices and measures available for use without resorting to the use of weapons capable of automatic fire where public order policing methods are inadequate. In public order policing situations, operational decisions must be made by an officer in overall command with recent and relevant training, skills and experience in public order policing. All radio communications should be recorded, and the recordings should be preserved. Plans for public order policing operations should identify the means of communication which SABC members will use to communicate with one another. A protocol should be developed and implemented for communication in large operations, including alternative mechanisms where the available radio system is such that it will not provide adequate means of communication. The SABC should review the adequacy of the training of the members who use specialized equipment such as water cannons and video equipment. All SABC helicopters should be equipped with functional video cameras. In operations where there is a high likelihood of the use of force, the plan should include the provision of adequate and speedy first aid to those who are injured. The Commission also emphasizes that all police officers should be trained in basic first aid. There should be a clear protocol which states that SABC members with first aid training who are at the scene of an incident where first aid is required should administer first aid. Specialist firearm officers should receive additional training in the basic first aid skill needed to deal with gunshot wounds. The Commission adds that the recommendations by the National Planning Commission for the demilitarization and professionalizing of the SABC should be implemented as a matter of priority. With regards to accountability where the police operation and its consequences have been controversial, requiring further investigation, the Minister and the National Commissioner should take care when making public statements or addressing members of the SABC. They should not say anything which might have the effect of closing the ranks or discourage members who are aware of inappropriate actions from disclosing what they know. The standing orders should more clearly require a full audit, trial, and an adequate recording of police operations. The SABC and its members should accept that they have a duty of public accountability and truth-telling because they exercise force on behalf of the South Africans, the Commission states. The staffing and the resourcing of the Independent Police Investigation Directorate, IPID, should be reviewed to ensure that it is able to carry out its functions effectively. Referral for further investigation in terms of Section 24(1) of the NPA Act. The Commission recommends a full investigation under the direction of the Director of Public Prosecutions in Northwest with a view to ascertaining criminal liability on the part of all members of the SABC who were involved in the incidents at Scene 1 and 2. For the purposes of investigation, a team should be appointed, headed by a senior state advocate, together with independent experts in the reconstruction of crime scenes, expert ballistic and forensic pathologists, practitioners, and senior investigators from IPID, and any such further experts as may be necessary. Referral for prosecution. The Commission also recommends that all the killings and assaults that took place between 11 and 15 August 2012 should be referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions for further investigation and to determine whether there is a basis for prosecution. The Commission states that the propensity in South Africa presently for the carrying of sharp instruments and firearms and the associated violence, even in service delivery protests, requires the strict enforcement of the laws that prohibit such conduct. It pointed out that the Lonmin workers can be seen very clearly on videos and photographs in possession of dangerous weapons at the public gatherings or in public places. The Commission has thus called for a further investigation of offences in terms of the Regulation of Gatherings Act and the Possession of Dangerous Weapons Act. Actions to be taken by the President. The affected ministers will study the Commission's report and advise me on the implementation of the recommendations. The Commission has also recommended that there must be an inquiry into the fitness to hold office of the National Police Commissioner, as well as the Northwest Provincial Police Commissioner, in terms of Section 9 of the South African Police Service Act. I have written to the National Commissioner to inform her of the recommendations pertaining to her. The Minister of Police will inform the former Northwest Police Commissioner on matters affecting her. Further updates on these matters will be provided in due course. Fellow South Africans, I have provided highlights of a report which, in full, is more than 600 pages long. I have ordered that the full report be published in the Government Gazette, as well as the Presidency and GCIS websites, to enable public access. Compatriots, the Marikana incident was a horrendous tragedy that has no place in a democracy where all citizens have a right to protest and where workers have the right to go on strike peacefully and negotiate working conditions with their employers peacefully. Breadwinners were taken away from their families in a brutal manner, and untold pain and suffering befell the families and relatives. The entire South African nation was shocked. The world was also shocked, as nobody expected this to happen in a free and democratic South Africa. We should, as a nation, learn from this painful episode. We should use it to build a more united, peaceful, and cohesive society. Violence has no place in our democracy that we worked so hard to achieve and build. I thank you.
Well, President Jacob Zuma reading a summary of what he says is a more than 600-page report looking at the findings, the recommendations, a whole list of things that would need to be done to make sure that we avert that situation. He calls it a horrendous tragedy that has no place in our country, given the brutality and the untold pain that it has inflicted on so many people. Well, joining us here in the studio is Mr. Muzim Simang, who is the attorney for the injured and arrested mine workers, as well as Mr. Dalimpofu, who was a lawyer for some of the dead miners. Gentlemen, your overall reaction, your impressions?
My impression is that the report is the report has virtually covered everything. It has vindicated the miners that the police action was inappropriate, that there was no the chain command was just not there, and the use of excessive force under the circumstances, it was not warranted. And of course, as he said, there is no place for such violence in South Africa. The police cannot just willy-nilly go out there and unleash machine gun fire on protesters, whether it's service delivery protesters or employees who are fighting against their employer. Surely, I think the report of the Commission has achieved the objectives and the miners have been vindicated.
Yeah, look, obviously the summary, in my view, probably covers certain highlights of what the President wanted to take out. I think it would be prudent for us to read the 600-page report, and that is what we intend to do, by the way. We have already spoken to the clients, and we are probably going to be meeting with them on Sunday to give our view of the report. We're hoping to study it in 2 days, not in 3 months. But my initial impressions really are that if what has been said here represents fairly the outcome, then what has really happened is that it looks like the largest victim of all this is Ria Pierre. And obviously the biggest question in everybody's mind was, how high was this going to go in terms of accountability? And so there'll be those who believe that it was Ria Pierre's fault. There'll be those who believe that she herself was under pressure from elsewhere. Look, let me put it this way. This is not the last word on this. That I can tell you 100%. But as to what the next step will be, obviously will depend on what the clients say to us on Sunday.
Well, at the Commission, I mean, you were quite forceful in your arguments that something should be done, or a significant portion or share of the blame should go to Deputy President Ramaphosa. Are you disappointed or surprised that the President says that the report says it cannot be said that he was the cause of the massacre? The accusations against him were groundless.
Yeah, well, it's not for me to be disappointed or overjoyed. It's the client's view. It was the client's view that the police there were under some influence. Unfortunately, we were able to secure some hard evidence in other people's views. So when we started, on the very first day, they were speculating that this was the case, even before we could find the evidence. So as I say, I know that they hold some strong views about those matters. That's why I'm saying this is certainly not the last word on this. This is just probably the first, but a very important round in something that is going to grip this country for some time. I mean, I don't believe, I was listening very carefully, and the most frequent word in that summary was first aid. But this is surely not about first aid. It's about much more serious issues. And I think that those issues, history will show that they will be dealt with one way or the other in the fullness of time. And the real culprits, will come out. But one has to really, more than anything else, extend the sympathies of the families of all the 44 people who lost their lives. And one of the things for us is the fact that we had hoped that the president was going to heed the recommendation of the judge in the High Court that the families and the other victims should be given a 48-hour notice, because there was a feeling that we would have, in fact, Mr. Msimang and I probably would not have been here if we had been given that notice. We would have been there in Marikana. We would have arranged for the people there to be counseled as they requested and as the judge recommended. But this is how it has happened. We will have to take it from here.
Mr. Msimang, I'm sure this applies to a lot of the people you were representing. The finding that they promoted conflict, some of them, which led to the deaths of security personnel and non-striking workers.
Yes, it is indeed true that personnel were killed, and violence really in all forms from whatever direction is not appropriate. People who act in a mob and who carry weapons and all that are inclined at one stage or the other to kill people, to run chaos, it can be chaos, pandemonium, and all these things. That thing is not justified, and I don't for a minute condone the death of any person. The securities, all the other mining officials, the people who were going to work when they wanted to go and work, who were not on strike, that cannot be condoned.
Are there particular areas that you think were not touched on, very briefly, Mr. Paul?
Oh yeah, there are very significant areas which were not touched on. And I think for those of us who sat there for almost 2 years or more than 2 years, it would be very interesting to see what is actually contained in the 600-page report. There are very, very serious issues about, for example, the deaths, the 10 deaths that occurred before the 34. There's this wide belief out there that, as the president said on Tuesday, that these miners had killed 10 people. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the majority of those people, those 10 people, were workers. There were the 2 security guards on the 12th, and the 2 policemen on the 13th. But more workers had lost their lives. And we said openly there that those people who perpetrated those gruesome acts must be found, and they must throw away the keys, as it were. But what can never be acceptable is to suggest, even for a minute, that the 3,000 people who gathered on that mountain for wages were responsible for those acts. The evidence was very clear that even on those days, a few days before, these were acts of a tiny minority. We don't know who they are. The police don't know who they are. And the police have actually investigated. So the recommendation that they must investigate, again, the NPA must investigate those matters, that has already been done. And very sadly, that is also a matter where the president has prejudged. So for him to say on Tuesday, those people killed people, and then on Thursday to say the NPA must investigate, that's also very unfortunate. And in fact, incidentally, as we heard that this thing is coming out today, we were consulting on that very issue of what should be done about his preempting the report.
Msimang, last word from you. What from here?
From here, of course, we'll have to start with the whole process of civil claims, and we hope that the process that be will be able to listen and look into these matters, so that we should be able to finalize them as soon as possible. And we hope that the people who have lost their loved ones and all that would really be comforted, and will have to look into ways of really, really easing their pain.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Okay. Well, we are going to cross now to our Pretoria studio, where Professor Tinyiko Maluleke is standing by for his take on what the president said. Good evening, Prof, and thanks very much for joining us.
Good evening. It's always a pleasure talking to you and your viewers.
Your take?
Well, I think my colleagues in the studio have already covered some of the main issues. The big question is, whether there is any political accountability in all this national tragedy. And from the highlights that the president gave us, it seems that there is no real political culprit, that the highest we are going to go is the Commissioner of Police. Now, that, of course, is not to be scoffed at. I think it is quite a massive thing for a commission to find that there is reason to be concerned about the conduct of Commissioner of Police at national level, but also at regional level. I think it is a big thing, and I'm not about to underestimate that. Even the findings against the police in and of themselves, the fact that there's referral for further investigation as to criminal liability, that again is big. But I think there is a deafening silence on political accountability in this case. I think that you have the police and Lonmin being, as it were, the fall guys, in inverted commas, and a deafening silence as far as the political aspect is. I mean, the president does say that ministers affected should study this further and advise him, but that's very soft. Study what and advise him how. So it seems to me that that's going to be the big issue.
Well, let's bring in my colleague Nozindombi Mia, who was sitting through that commission for all those a couple of years. Finally, it's all come to the end.
About 18 months worth of commission hearings. It's quite anticlimactic, I must tell you, Vuyo. Just hearing some of the recommendations, the issue around the police, the fact that the president saying that the recommendation should be that police should review their tactics on how they deal with certain, crowd gathering issues. There should be retraining of the police. I mean, these are, to a large extent, by and by. The recommendations that have come out are not particularly shocking or surprising. It's what we were anticipating. We did expect that National Police Commissioner Ria Pierre would face the key brunt of her decision-making, and to be held responsible for what eventually happened in the police's decision to move to a tactical phase, which led to the police using lethal ammunition to then shoot down those miners. So I must admit it's quite anticlimactic. I think a lot of media people who've been following this Marikana report are quite eagerly anticipating that 600-page report to really review it and scrutinize it and see what are some of the recommendations that came out. Another observation which I thought was quite interesting was the Commission's recommendation on Lonmin, and basically finding that had Lonmin acted in a manner in which was safe, fair, and nipped this growing voice of dissent in the bud, we wouldn't be here.
Prof, what's your take on that? Speaking of Lonmin, and given that the deputy president was a director of Lonmin at the time, do you think, even though he has been exonerated, that the findings against Lonmin will, in some way or the other, in one way or the other, spread to him as well, at least by implication?
Well, I mean, certainly, because at that time he was an important player inside of Lonmin, quite a big shareholder. So any finding that is adverse to Lonmin implicates him. There is, of course, something else that there is deafening silence about. I mean, the president has spoken about how horrendous, how unfortunate, how shocking, how this thing has no place in a democracy and so on. But very little really directed at the victims' families and the victims themselves in terms of what recourse is open to them. I suppose there's caution there, given legal liabilities that might be pursued by the lawyers. But I thought that at the heart of what we're talking about here is also the question of the families. What about them? What did the Commission say about them? And one mustn't, of course, jump to conclusions because we haven't yet
read the entire report. Yeah. I want us to turn our attention, if we can, to Nozindombe, to AMCU and the NUM. AMCU officials did, encourage inflammatory songs and did not ensure that the conduct of their members was upright. Again, on the NUM side, that they did not exercise their best endeavors, and they wrongly advised wrong drillers, for example, not smelling of roses, both unions. Definitely. They come out of this. Definitely.
There needs to be an overhaul in Marikana, not just in Marikana, but in the entire mining sector, around labor unions, around issues of violence, intimidation. The fact that Joseph Matunjo was ultimately exonerated does not mean that his members did not act in a manner that was non-violent, that was peaceful, that was, a manner in which they should have conducted themselves in. But as well, bearing the brunt of it was the NUM. It's spot on exactly what, what the recommendations are. The NUM missed the ball on this one. They did not sufficiently protect their members. They encouraged their members to keep on going to work when they knew fully well that the situation on the ground was extremely volatile. So the recommendations coming out from AMCU and NUM, I don't think are quite as punitive as they should be. There should be more done. There should be a conversation that's open about our labor space, about our union space. How is AMCU going about getting more members? How is the NUM? They've lost such a large number of memberships, specifically in Marikana. They're down to less than 10%, 15% representativity in Marikana. That tells you a lot. It tells you that they're not doing their mandate as a labor union. They are not representing their members. They're not speaking to their members. What is AMCU doing right and wrong? We need to open that debate.
Prof, if I may come back to you, Ria Piecha, the National Police Commissioner, there's already a cloud hanging over her head. I suppose this episode is not going to make life any easier for her, isn't it?
Yeah, I think she's on her way out. The President has said that he has informed her of this finding, but stopped short of telling us what next. My own sense is that she's probably on her way out. And insofar as the finding is against her, not as an individual, but in fact her action as police commissioner, as far as this incident, this tragic incident is concerned, I think it is probably fair. But as I said earlier, I do think that there were political issues around her action that I think unfortunately have not been addressed, perhaps addressed in the 600 pages that we are talking about. The Minister of Police, to whom she reports and with whom she works, is coming scot-free, as it were, out of this episode, and I don't know how helpful that is. Yet, I think that a police commissioner, national police commissioner, is a big fish. And for this commission to have gone as far as they have gone with her, I think it is quite an important statement.
Prof, if I may just add very, very briefly, the issue of, public accountability and truth-telling, but also the issue of the staffing and the resourcing of the IPID, which the President said must be reviewed. Read together with what is most likely going to happen, if I take your word for it, to the National Police Commissioner. What does that tell us about the, the criminal justice system and the issues that have been out there in the public over the past couple of years?
I think the South African police should hang their heads in shame, at least on this matter. I mean, if you listened carefully to the president, he was basically saying the commission found the police leadership to have lied and misinformed the commission and not told the full truth a few times. I mean, that is very serious indictment on the conduct of the police.
Okay.
And I don't know that the only problem at IPID is resources, because you would get that impression that the only problem is resources. And one would need to see what the fuller recommendations are. And as Dali was saying, first aid is one thing, but we're dealing. It's really very minor in the, greater scheme of things.
Allow me to come back to Nozindombi very briefly here, Prof. I mean, both lawyers saying this is not the end of this matter. What can you predict the next step? What do you think is going to happen next?
Undoubtedly, they certainly are going to be going to the High Courts to deal with the issue of the culpability. They're going to be filing the civil claims, and it's now going to come down to a case of the recommendations have validated some of their assertions and assumptions that the police were to blame, etc., etc. And it will give them more of a clout, more clout when it comes to the legal element of it. So that will be one element that we'll be seeing playing out throughout the rest of this year. But what is something that is such a critical issue is the issue of the president talking about further recommendations on more investigations. Certainly more investigations need to be done with regards to police, with regards to Lonmin. So this is far from over, Vuyo, exactly like Darling Pofu said. We're at the halfway mark, certainly, but there needs to be more investigation, more interrogation of exactly the factors that led to that situation.
Nozindombi Mia, Professor Tinyiko Malulega, thanks to both of you for joining us during the course of this special broadcast. And that's where we're going to leave it for this evening. But do watch our later bulletins, but also Morning Live tomorrow morning, where these issues will be discussed further. From me, for now, it's a good night.